Hello and welcome to this special on the budget for 2018, particularly focusing on the biomedical space. Really interesting because it's almost broken up into two timeframes rather than actually any form of deliberate funding. On the short term, starting July 1, very much already leaked out into the media and out into the space around research and development. There has been a bit of a crackdown in terms of how you look at R&D, particularly those that are claiming the R&D tax incentive on a business as usual basis. That was a known. It's supposed to save about $2.4 billion, and that also therefore does imply that there will be some loss across the board. But they are clearly trying to ramp up, particularly medical research, and are basically rewarding those with between $20 million and $100 million for increased tax relief for those that are showing high-end and high-intensity R&D, and it ramps up even further the bigger you get. The question is whether that affects the smaller firms. Time will tell. The longer term is an interesting one, and I think that's probably more from what caught our attention is the funding being put out there in terms of where it sits. Now we know about the Medical Research Future Fund that was put up and basically funded over the last 5 years. Well, they're finally starting to allocate money out of that, and there's about $1.3 billion over the next 12 years going into the industry. It's a small but significant amount. You can't go past that. There is always going to be need for more, but it is deliberately and strategically focused on the industry particularly. So 248 million is going to be put towards clinical trials. It's really going to try and make Australia a one-stop shop in clinical trial materials. It's trying to bring together basically industry, research heads, and also major managers to try and actually make that one-stop shop idea, and that's what that 248 is for. 240 million, which is going to be allocated out of that fund, is going towards basically the discovery phase and looking towards inception phase, getting clinical trials up and running from that initial conception. And that I think is a really positive step forward. There is no doubt there is funding needed at that bottom end. The argument could be though is that the back end clinical trials need a bit more funding, and that unfortunately wasn't there. The final part of the first breakdown of that $707 million is a $93 million fund that's basically designed to improve relationships between researchers, industry, and also what's going on inside the biomedical area as a whole, increase research, and basically again helps in and pops into that whole idea of clinical trials in this country. The other $5 million is going towards a very interesting area. It's to be funded over the next 10 years, and that is around genomics. And genomics is clearly a very strong area going forward, and the government believes that very clearly. We are all about including what the government says around this smarter economy, and this is clearly high-end manufacturing at its best in terms of really trying to map towards genomes, really trying to match towards basically personalized medicines. And the first $20 million was already allocated to the McKenzie project. It's a real interesting one. It's very much into the idea of screening for muscular dystrophy, X syndromes, cystic fibrosis, etc., but there is clearly a lot of money there in the taking, and it certainly will be aimed particularly at researchers in the universities, and one that we think you could really look to. So an interesting take. I think you've got to look at it from a whole perspective. It's probably a good takeout for the industry. There's no doubt they're trying to drive the economy towards high-end manufacturing, which is exactly what this is targeting. All in all, I think you've got to see it as a positive.